I want to talk this morning on the subject of modern martyrs to a very ancient cause. The text I want to use for that is, "He who would save his life will lose it, and he who would lose his life for my sake will save it." And I want to speak on Jesus, the Son of Man, who had a Trinitarian ministry when he was here on earth of preaching, teaching, and healing. And I want to speak about especially some CFO martyrs to this cause, this Christian cause of healing. The first one I want to mention is Glenn Clark himself, who founded the Camps Farthest Out and who introduced in 1941, I think it was, the healing ministry into the camps. In 1941, there were very few camps, I think only 4. And after the ministry of healing was introduced into the camps, they grew by leaps and bounds. Until today, someone says there's something like 50 all over the world. And Glenn wrote a standard book, a textbook on Christian healing back in 1944, I think it was. He published it. And Glenn died in 1956, a victim to cancer of the blood. I believe that's what they diagnosed it to be. He gave his life for this cause of bringing spiritual healing, Christian healing into the world. John Gaynor Banks, who many of you know, founded the healing magazine called Sharing, which his wife is still carrying on. And he founded the Order of St. Luke's, which is a healing ministry. And he followed the master, the great physician in this healing ministry, for many years. And he established the healing ministry not only in this country, but particularly in England. And to this cause he was dedicated and devoted. And John Gaynor Banks gave up his life for this cause. He who will lose his life, he who will save his life will lose it. But he who will lose his life for my sake, for my purpose and my cause, will find it. And I think John Gaynor found his life at the altar of a CFO camp in California a few years ago, while helping to conduct a blessing service, I think it was, or a healing service, I forget now which. While he was conducting this service, he was stricken with a heart attack and died on the way to the hospital. I think he died before he got there. He gave his life to a thing he was dedicated to and devoted to for many years. And I believe in giving his life to that great cause. The third empire of the teachings of the ministry of Jesus, the Son of Man. The empire of healing, which of course has not been very widespread among the churches. But he worked for it and was devoted to it and dedicated to it and almost lived it. That ministry all the time. He had healing ministries all over the country in the Episcopal churches that he could have them in. And he gave his life to this cause. And in giving his life, I'm sure that he found it. Many of you remember Rebecca Beard. I don't know that she ever spoke in the CFO camp, but she was in Marybrook. And she had healing. She was a doctor, a medical doctor, and apparently was a good medical physician in her day. And she turned to religion and was healed of cancer. She's written it in one of her books. And after that, she became a devoted disciple to the healing cause or ministry of the Son of Man, the great physician Jesus. And she and Wally, her husband, held meetings all over the country, and many through their ministry were healed of all manner of physical diseases. I don't know that I've ever known anyone more dedicated and actually devoted to this great ministry of the healing of the human body of disease than Rebecca. Rebecca gave her life. I think she was a martyr. There are modern martyrs to an ancient cause. And the ancient cause is the healing ministry of Jesus. And the modern martyrs are those who give their lives in this ministry. I mean actually give up their lives to their conviction and their dedication and their devotion. And Rebecca died of cancer, which seemingly came back. But before she died, she left at least 3 most wonderful books, inspirational books, and written with the lucidity of a fine medical physician. These books have been responsible for influencing many, many people in the world, and particularly doctors and professional people, on 2 continents at least. And she was a martyr to that cause, and by losing her life, she found it. And she found it in many people, maybe hundreds of people, who have been delivered and healed and emancipated and set free through her books. Shortly after she gave her life as a martyr to this cause, her husband Wally died suddenly. He had always been her assistant, her right-hand man. Had always helped her in her missions, healing missions. Was always there. And he too suddenly left this plane. And I am quite sure that in giving his life to this ancient cause, the cause of healing of the physical body that has been rejected by the world, and particularly the Christian world, I think he found his life. For he who will save his life will lose it, and he who will give his life, lose his life, will save it. Now there was a man in Canada I met him. He was a marvelous soul. I think he did more than anyone else to plant in the minds of people this great thought, let go and let God. His name was Albert Cliff. And if ever there was a man dedicated entirely, body, mind, and soul, to the ministry of healing, it was Albert Cliff. He could have been a lot of other things and made a success in the world. A brilliant man. But he decided that he was going to give his life and his energy and his talent and his genius and whatever he had to this ancient ministry and rejected empire of Jesus, the ministry of healing. And Albert Cliff died suddenly with a heart attack. He gave his life to this great cause. Can you possibly say that in giving his life to this great cause that he didn't win his life? He didn't try to save his life. His whole mission in life was to try to save other lives. And Albert Cliff is possibly responsible for saving the lives of people, body, mind, and soul, of hundreds of others. And for this he gave his own life. Just a couple of years ago, Roy Burkhart was in the CFO camp in Ohio. He had a great church in Columbus, thousands of members in it. And one of the reasons why that church had grown so enormously in number was because Roy Burkhart was dedicated and devoted to the ministry of spiritual healing. I know several people who have testified to me that just 2 years ago, I think it was, in that camp, that they went apart with him and prayed for their physical ailments, and that they were emancipated and released and healed through his prayer. He went from there up into Canada on a preaching mission, and up there it was discovered that he was in the last stages of cancer. And all the time that he had been releasing others from physical pain and from all manner of diseases, both mind and body, he himself was being eliminated from this plane by the steady inroads of cancer. He gave his life trying to reestablish that great cause of the Son of Man that has been so rejected, and that is the healing of the body as well as the mind and the soul. In giving his life, I think he found it in a marvelous way. One of my finest friends was J. Rufus Mosley. Rufus lived a long and happy and useful life. But his dedication to healing and his devotion to healing were the things that stand out in my mind far greater than anything else in the ministry of Rufus Mosley. He believed in it with all his heart. He never failed to speak about it. I can remember him still down in North Carolina, Western North Carolina CFO, when they would carry him out on cushions and put him in a chair on a platform and his feet up on pillows. He couldn't walk. And there he would deliver his messages to us. He himself, at that time, passing from this plane with a number of different diseases. One of them was protein starvation. The other, with which he died, was cancer. But even while there, carried out, always he was delivering his message and reporting his devotion and dedication to this ancient cause of Jesus, the ministry of healing. Several went to his funeral. One man down in Goldsboro, North Carolina, a man who had had a very difficult time trying to find any real conviction in his life concerning a redemptive type of religion. And when I had a mission in North Carolina, he told me about it and talked to me about it. He said, I just can't get hold. I just can't see it. It seemed to him that he didn't want to go on forever in another life. It was hard to conceive the possibility of anyone wanting to go on and on forever. Or he had his mind more or less influenced by the terrible life that we have to go on through here in this place. And he had that associated with the other life. So it was hard for him to get hold of a redemptive religious experience. And he went to that funeral of Rufus Mosley, down in Macon, Georgia. And he said he saw Rufus mystically, in a mystical manner, while they were preaching his funeral. He saw him standing at the head of the casket. And he said he looked to be about 30 years old, very radiant. And he said, when I saw that, I was convinced and convicted. And he has since become a wonderful Christian, as Tommy Tyson will tell you if you ever ask him. Yeah, this is a great cause. It's a rejected cause. And many of the pioneers in it of the present day, modern pioneers, are losing their lives in this cause. And for as far as I'm concerned, they are martyrs. That the martyrs did not stop with the saints of old. That martyrdom is still going on, not necessarily being burned at the stake, or being killed in the Inquisitions, but dying for a cause that has needed to be reestablished on the earth shortly after the days of the apostles. And it is being, I think, established little by little on earth. both among the regular churches and those that are not regular. Emmett Fox in New York had perhaps one of the largest congregations in the United States. He was a metaphysical teacher. I suppose that in that hippodrome on Sunday morning there would be anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 people assemble. And this was all built upon the ministry of healing. Healing of bodies and healing of minds. He gave himself unstintedly to this. I imagine that Emmett Fox, through his writings and through his counselings with people, has set free from physical diseases thousands of people, healed by the power of God. Through this instrument, this channel, this agent. Yet he himself went to France and died quickly, suddenly. A martyr to the very thing that he was devoted to and dedicated to for many years. Now, of course, many people couldn't take his type of religion here on earth. They couldn't see how a metaphysical religion could be redemptive, or that it could be approved of God. But when Emmett Fox died quickly in France, in Paris, I am quite sure that the great physician, the Son of Man, the one who brought the healing ministry in the Third Empire, preaching, teaching, and healing, I am quite sure that he met Emmett Fox and said, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant. You have been devoted and dedicated and trustworthy to one of the empires of my ministry, so terribly rejected and so terribly needed. Come into your rest now. Tarry a while with me. Take your rest. You've done your duty nobly." And so he too, I think, would come under this great scripture. He gave his life for a great cause, the cause of healing, and in giving it he found his life. The Jewish man who was racing with his books. He started about 5 years ago. I've never known anyone more dedicated to healing than Joel Goldsmith. And it just seemed to me that he was just having to race to get his message of healing out. So book after book, book after book, came out of his typewriter and into Harper's Publishing House. Sometimes 1 and 2 a year. He's just racing. He had to get this message out. And no one had the slightest idea that he too would become a martyr. His whole system of healing was based upon the elimination of the conception of good and evil. His religious conviction was that of the absolute, that God didn't create anything bad, didn't create any sickness, and that people caught between these two horns of dilemma, good and evil, and could know one thing only by knowing the opposite thing. He tried to eliminate that And that was his message, and his purpose was to bring about in the people, his readers, and those who heard him, a good new conception that God heals. That the Son of Man is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that his promises are true. That what he did, he still does and will continue to do throughout all eternity. And what he said, he still says and will continue to say. That was his message. He was a clarifier of grace. All through his books it's grace, grace, grace. We're healed by grace. We're healed by grace. All we have to do is to get out from between these two horns of dilemma, good and evil, and any knowledge of it, and rise above it into the third heaven, that is, up in there where the absolute God is, who cannot be changed, who is unchangeable. And in the midst of all this, and apparently in the prime of health and vigor, not an old man, his message came to an end suddenly. Evidently he had typed in the last paragraph and put a period on it, and down under that had written in capital letters, "It's finished." And he went to England and died quickly, apparently without any particular cause or reason. He just died. A martyr to the great cause of healing. We have three wonderful women who are martyrs, though they are living. All three of them devoted and dedicated to this phase of the Master's ministry. They have had to go to surgery, still living and still carrying on, and to the end of their days. We don't know how long it will be, but to the end of their days, they'll be devoted to the ministry of healing, of health and wholeness, and while they have breath and can use a typewriter or a pen, they'll be delivering this message. All three have been afflicted with cancer, and they will go on until the Lord himself will say to them, "You have given your life to this cause for my sake. Enter ye in and take your rest." Let us not feel badly about these folks who have given their lives to a cause. Let us, on the other hand, rejoice that they remained true to the very end, to that cause in the life of Jesus, which had to do with the relieving of people of pain and suffering and disease, and doing it by means of spiritual power. For every time that they brought spiritual power and spiritual therapy to bear upon these physical diseases, they were doing more than bringing physical healing. They were bringing healing in the spiritual parts and in the mind as well. Oh, let us rejoice that Tony was telling the truth. There is over there, just beyond our physical sight, a heavenly council ring. And these I have mentioned are there in that heavenly council ring. And they are glad that in CFO and other places, the ministry of healing that Jesus brought is still going on. And that he who will save his life will lose it. But he who will give his life to others in trouble, in pain, and suffering, and sickness, for my sake, will find it. I have run over, and I know Marge is a generous soul. And, do I have 15 minutes? It looks to me like a quarter after. Oh, do I go to 10:30? All right. Now, there are some things most difficult to heal. They can be healed, of course, by the Lord working through his agents and ministers here on earth. And these things are rather like thorns in the flesh. Some people think of Paul's trouble as a physical disease. I've heard some say that it was epilepsy. And I've heard others say it was of a different nature. Someone told me that it was blindness, that for a while he went blind. In order to get out of his consciousness the tragedy of Stephen being stoned to death while he stood there and held the coats. And that this thing that was in his consciousness about Stephen was a thorn in the flesh, that he didn't want to look at it, not even in memory. He didn't throw any stones, but he held the coats. Some say that was it. I think these shynesses that we have are thorns in the flesh. I think these timidities that we suffer from are kind of thorns in the flesh. And these, what the psychologists call inferiority complexes, I think they're thorns in the flesh. And they are wonderful if they're overcome. Now they can be easily overcome, not by prayer, but by doing them, letting the Lord use you and overcoming them. Say, for instance, you have the thorn of cowardice, a lack of moral courage. Do you think you can get rid of it by prayer? I don't. But I think your courage will grow every time you stand up and witness. You've all had a witness. And overcome that sense of a lack of courage and speak out, even though emotionally inside you're just living 1,000 years. Now, is there anyone here, especially over 50, who is a timid soul? You a timid soul? Well, you come up. You want to get this on the tape. Now, you want to be cured of that, don't you?
I do.
All right, you witness to these folks just exactly what God has done for you and what God means to you. You just bear witness.
Oh. Well, in 1949, I went up to Lake Winnipesaukee. It's the first camp I had ever attended. Well, I was born again. I had a marvelous experience down at the lake. And I had gone up with a heavy heart and a guilt complex. And after 3 or 4 days, it's the first time I'd ever seen Glenn Clark of Starr Daily. And, well, I just drank the whole thing in. I just sat there in rapture. And day by day, I started being filled. And after about the 3rd day, well, I just reached the saturation point, I guess. And I just had a feeling I wanted to go off to myself. I slipped down to the lake, and I sat there for several hours, and something inside of me, I had felt like I was tight in here, just couldn't breathe properly. Just chest was tight. And this, I sat there and started praying, and on a big rock, and the tears started streaming down, and this tightness in my chest started breaking loose. I don't think I'd ever felt that before. All of a sudden, well, I noticed that I could breathe. I said, oh, I can breathe all the way to my stomach.
You were really going down.
Yes. And then it seemed to me I had never written a thing in my life. I had no talent for writing of any kind.
Everybody does in the camp, though.
And so these beautiful verses started coming to me, and it seemed that my mother's voice was coming to me. I was just weeping and weeping, trying to shed off something. It was my past sins, I think. And so it just seemed to me, she kept saying, weep not, my child, but onward go, and you shall conquer every woe. And just numbers, I don't know how many beautiful sentences like that. I still have it written down. And I got up then, after so long a time, I missed my lunch. I didn't want anything to eat. I was too happy. And I started to walk back up through that Sunset Terrace, that lane, you know. And I was so light that I was afraid I was going to fly away. I mean it. I guess people say they want to pass on. And but I was actually afraid that I was going to fly away. I mean it. I was just so light, I didn't feel the weight of my body. And so that experience lasted me for months and months. I was so happy that nothing could bother me. The ordinary things of life that formerly had tormented me had all passed away. They just went in one ear and out the other.
Thank you very much. Amen and amen. Now, she has a witness. She has a witness there, and if because of timidity she doesn't use that witness, even that which she has shall be taken away. Now we've got to turn over to Marge. Let's have a little prayer.